Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another podcast for Cash Flow Project. Today we have a very special guest, David Pere. He joined the Marine Corps in August 2008. Since that time, he's lived in or traveled to many unique places around the world, including Afghanistan. David got started in real estate investing in 2015. He house hacked a duplex with the FHA loan, lived in it for a while until getting married to his beautiful wife, Kimberly, and receiving orders to Hawaii. While stationed in Hawaii, David bought a 10-unit apartment in Missouri and has had continued success with real estate investing since. Through these experiences, from Military to Millionaire was born with the goal of teaching service members and veterans how to build wealth through real estate investing, entrepreneurship, and personal finance. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so let's just dive right in. How did you get started in real estate investing?
I read that wonderful purple book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that everybody attributes their beginning to. I was actually getting into Amway, right? Like multi-level marketing. A buddy of mine was trying to sell me into that. And I mean, I joined for about a month. And in the process, he was like, you got to read this book. It's awesome. It's going to change your world. And I was like, yeah, I'm a Marine. I don't read. And he's like, okay. And he like literally pulled the disc out of his cargo pocket and was like, I have it on CD. And I know you drive a lot as a recruiter. So plug it in and listen to it. And I was like, okay, well, he called my bluff. So, all right, fine. And I mean, it was less than 3 months from starting that CD and reading a whole lot of the Purple Library on Audible and a whole lot of Bigger Pockets books on Audible that I had bought my duplex. I mean, it was like maybe 3 months from inserting the disc to buying the duplex because it was just timing was all right. And so, yeah, I jumped into a duplex, house hacked, and I guess from there it was like, oh, wow, this works. And this really isn't that complicated. I'm going to keep doing this. That's basically how I got started.
Nice. And it sounds like you just got another duplex under contract, right?
Yeah, I do right now. I should close 8 days. So I don't think anything will stop us at this point. Inspection's gone. As long as he repairs what he's supposed to repair, we'll close and life will be good.
Nice. So how is that like buying in this new COVID reality that we're in?
It's actually, normally I would tell you that, oh yeah, it's great, right? Like everyone always asks like, oh, what's it like buying real estate from, across the world without ever like looking at it? Like, oh, no big deal. But man, right now is wild. I had to do a letter, like a statement of understanding on forbearance and like that I know what forbearance is, that I've never used forbearance, that I don't plan on using forbearance. I had to write a 3-page Word document explaining my self-employment income and stating how I thought it would be affected by COVID, what I was doing to mitigate that, what I expected my self-employment income to look. Basically, I had to predict the future for my bank. It was weird. Like I've got great terms, but the like barrier to entry to actually get the loan. And what's really funny is over the last few years, like I've never paid more than 6% down on a property with the exception of a $12,000 flip that I bought, right? Like that was a cash, like here's a couple grand, whatever. But, I mean, I've done seller financing wrapped in as a second. I've done some really crazy financing and never had any issues. This thing, I'm buying at 15% under market value and putting 25% down on it. So I'm essentially asking for like a 60% loan to value. This should be the easiest loan in the entire world. And I already have loans with this bank. They already know I'm a good, like we have a relationship, but just because of what's going on in the world, it's been a pain in the rear just to get the clear to close. And like, we're still waiting on the like final thumbs up because the day before the loan closes, they're going to call and talk to my boss to make sure I'm still in the Marine Corps. And they're going to run another credit check because they're just super worried about who they lend money to right now. It's been a whole different beast, but the financing is going to be great. I'm going to get 4.375 on an interest or on a straight commercial loan, which is almost a full percentage lower than what I have on my 10 unit. So I'm probably going to hit them up and refinance as soon as this is done again. But yeah.
Nice. Were you able to negotiate any discounts with the seller?
Yeah, he was asking 92. We got it under contract. We actually only got it under contract for like 91, but that's with him paying closing costs. So that takes 3,000 out of my pocket, or puts 3,000 back into my pocket, and him putting a new roof on it. So, yeah, I mean, I only really knocked like $1,000 off the price, but I probably got $14,000 worth of extras thrown into that. So I'll take it.
Sweet. So how does someone get started in real estate investing?
Well, the first thing you got to do is just learn everything you can. I think the question that people start with this, like, I need to buy a house, and that's all well and good. But the what's the old adage? Was it George Washington? I'm going to butcher this. It might have been George Washington. Maybe it was Abe Lincoln. Whoever, the axe thing with, like, you can start hacking away at a tree, and it's going to take you 3 hours to cut down the tree. But if you spend the first half hour sharpening your axe, then you probably cut it down in an hour and a half and still be done first. That whole concept. I think what you need to do is figure out, like, what are your goals? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be? So there are some investment strategies that I've used at some point that I don't know that I'm ever going to use again, because they just take way more time. Like this duplex thing, maybe 3 or 4 hours of my time to close the property. And then once it's closed, all I'm going to do is look at my report from my property manager and throw it into my bookkeeping. And that's, with the exception of someone dying in my property, which has happened, with the exception of something like that, I won't touch anything. It's very simple. But some stuff like flipping houses, or even sometimes syndications, depending on which seat you're in, take more effort to get into. They can still be very passive. Or house flipping is very active. So you got to figure out, like, what is it that you want to do? Do you want it to replace your income now? Do you want it to be a gradual replacement of income down the road? How much effort do you want to put in? How much time do you have to put in? Once you kind of know that framework, you pick a strategy and learn everything you can about that strategy. Spend like 60 days, 90 days just reading books, listen to podcasts, whatever, and then get around people who are doing it. Ask if you can, hang out with them. Maybe you apprentice with them. Maybe you work with them. Maybe you find a deal and you partner with them. People will ask for mentorship, but that's great. But you guys know that there was a house in Kailua that I had found and bird dogged and basically said, hey, I don't want the fee. I just want to help you guys out with the renovation. I want to learn what you're doing with this flip, and I want to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. And I just tagged along for free and helped out the house, and that was great. And I think little things like that, and then just jump in. Once you feel like you have a good understanding, don't second guess yourself. Go for it. Real estate investing is not that complicated. It just takes time and a little bit of discipline and some math. But you get a smart friend help you with your math.
Yeah. So about the strategies, why do you prefer buy and hold?
It's a long-term game for me. Flipping is great, but there's a couple of different things that I like about the buy and hold. If you flip, you're still in short-term capital gains tax. You're still active. If you stop flipping, you lose money. I like buy and hold because I know that my 10 unit in, I think at this point, like 13 years will be paid off, and it will cash flow like a king for me until I decide that I'm done with it, which will either be when it implodes or when I die. Unless something crazy comes up, but I don't really plan on doing anything with it. That thing's going to make me, once all's said and done, it's going to make me several $1,000s a month to do nothing. And I like that aspect. I like the depreciation. I like the tax benefits. I like a lot of that, but I really just like the fact that once the property is purchased, if you have a good team in place, you don't have to do very much with it, and it will grow over time. So while everyone's freaking out right now about having to change all their strategies and wonder what's next, I'm kind of sitting back with some cash saying, cool, who's going to sell me their house at a discount?
Yep.
It's easy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Tell me more about that 10 unit. Like, how did you acquire it? Like, what kind of financing? Anything creative?
Yeah, the 10 unit was a little creative. It was kind of a weird situation. I was actually sending out letters to like absentee homeowners who own duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. I hadn't decided that I wanted to go any bigger than that because at this point, I only had 3 units. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy another 2 or 3, maybe 4 units this year. I was going to buy like 1 more multifamily. That was my goal for the year. And this was year 2 of real estate investing. Actually, I guess it'd been about a year, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. And so I was looking at duplexes and triplexes and sending out a bunch of letters. Guy called me and was like, yeah, I have a duplex, but I don't want to sell it to you. My first thought's like, cool. Why are you calling me? Like, you could have just not called me. And he's like, but I have a 10 unit. Like, oh, all right. And I was super nervous about it. I'm like, okay, well, I happened to be in town. It was around Christmas time. And I was able to go through one of the 10 units with him because it was vacant. And so I kind of saw what that one unit was. I saw the outside and we talked numbers, came up with a price. He was asking 240, came down to, it was like 225. And then after repairs, the repairs and stuff came in, I had just finished reading one of Vince's favorite books on never splitting the difference.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the repairs came in needing like $8,000 worth of work. I asked him for like 16 and he said, no, I'll give you 10, which was more than I needed anyway. And I gave him some really abstract number. And he gave me 12,500 off, even though I only needed 8,000 off. And then, so we bought it for 212.5, which this is Missouri price. So 212,000, 10 unit is still good, but not as absurd as it sounds for any of you listening in like New York or Hawaii. But yeah. And then because the way it worked, it was almost a fluke. So the seller had agreed to pay 10% in seller financing. And so I was going to pay the other 10% out of pocket, and then the bank, or 15% out of pocket, and the bank was going to pay 75, right? So it'd be 75% bank, 10% seller, 15% from me. And I guess the bank didn't get the memo on the way that we figured out the inspection results and the price drop. So instead of doing a seller pay me back or whatever, we just dropped the price. So the bank showed up with a check at closing, and I got this phone call. And mind you, I'm in Hawaii at the time. I got a phone call from the bank. It's like, hey, we got a problem. I'm like, oh man, what's up? They're like, well, we're here at closing. We've got your check. We've got the seller. But we brought too much. And so you can either not put as much money down and take the loan as the terms we originally agreed to, or you can wait and close in 2 days when we go back and rework the paperwork and cut a different check for closing. It's like, so my option is take more money from the bank, keep more money in my pocket, or wait. Like, perfect, let's close. And so I got a check back. And so, yeah, I only ended up coming into the property for like 10 grand. And
Wow.
yeah, it was great. And then 18 months later, I refinanced, paid myself back, paid my seller off, and had the property with 70% loan to value on a better rate. And the really cool thing is, if you know anything about seller financing, it was a 4% interest for 5 years, and I paid him off at 18 months. If you do all the math on that, because there was no prepayment, I paid less than 1% for like the money that I was borrowing from him. So it's awesome.
It's awesome.
That's amazing. So speaking of creative financing, what's the deal with cattle financing?
See, I got to update my questions on there. I got to remember that's what I put on there. I actually haven't had that question in a while. I love this story, so I'm glad you asked. I bought, essentially if you look at I had 5 acres with a house on it in Missouri, and the guy to the north of me had 10 acres with a house, and it was 2 5-acre parcels, and the middle one was just raw land. And I told him for years, like, hey, well, not for years, I guess, for as long as I knew the guy, hey, when you move, I want to buy your middle 5. And he's like, I'm never moving. This is my forever home, until his job told him they were moving him. And so he calls me, and they were going to sell all 10. And I was like, nope, what do you want for the 5? And I ended up paying more than it was worth, because the original buyer for the house wanted that 5 as well. So I just outbid him by like $1,500 an acre or whatever. So I paid like $8,000 an acre when it was really only worth like 6. But it's kind of going to be my little homestead. I can actually split it into 3 1/3 acre tracts and sell it off. There are options now that I have that I didn't have before, or 3. Anyway, you know what I mean? 3 parcels. And basically what I did to justify that was, we had a few cattle, and my father-in-law lives across the street, and he's a cattle farmer. I was like, how many head of cattle would it take, or would this land be able to hold? It's like, 10 or 11. Like, okay, great. And I did the math and realized that we could just grow our herd to 11 or 12. It would keep the grass clean, maintain the place, and the money that we would make from selling cattle every year would pay for the entire mortgage for the additional 5 acres. And so that was 3 years ago. And I think, and not to say that we've cash flowed a ton, but I think we're about $1,000 over what I've paid on the mortgage to have bought that land. So basically what I did was, that was not an investment. That land was not, it was just something I wanted personally. It was not an investment strategy. But instead of saying like, oh man, that's not going to work because it's not a good investment, it's going to cost me money, we just figured out how to make it work. And we had some more cattle come in, and we basically own this land for free. And once the land is paid off in a few years, then it'll cash flow. We'll still have the cattle. They'll still mow the grass. So yeah, it's just a unique strategy. And the cool thing is that you get like a agricultural tax break for having enough cattle on the land. So it actually lowered the taxes on the residents on the original 5 acres too, which is a nice bonus.
Yeah, not
That's
bad.
crazy. Yeah, I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's a unique. It was kind of luck of the draw, but it worked out.
Yeah, it's if I get some land, throw some cows on it just for the tax break. Right on. All right. Is it my turn? Am I up?
Yeah.
All right. Let me get here. So before I jump into my questions here, you mentioned 2 things earlier that I thought was really important. Just want to foot stomp on those, like goal setting. A lot of people, when they get into real estate, they don't set out with the end in mind or with the goal in mind of what they're going for. They just want to get in real estate. They don't care how, they don't care what. They just start buying stuff, and they realize 4 or 5 years later, maybe even 10 years later in some cases, that they built this hodgepodge portfolio that isn't going where they want it to go. And another analogy I use is, you spend this whole time climbing the ladder and realize that it's leaning against the wrong wall. And sometimes it takes people, a decade to realize that. And I see a lot of people at conferences and meetups that do that. So one thing that has helped me, and what I tell people now, is the book you have on the shelf behind you is the 4-Hour Work Week. In there, it talks about dreamlining, where you pretty much like you sit down, build your like ideal life on paper, and then go out and research how much each one of those things cost. How much does your ideal house cost? How much does your ideal, travel expenses cost per year? Your ideal car, your ideal whatever food budget, like everything. And then like kind of just keep chunking down from annual to monthly to weekly to even daily in his case. So I think that's one big thing for newer investors to do, is just sit down and figure out what the end goal is first, and then work back to figure out which real estate vehicle will get you there the fastest and the easiest. So that's an awesome one. And then the whole just jump in. I know in the military, we're really good with like 80% plans, 70% plans, and all this stuff. And what that means is like, we don't sit around too much and like try to meticulously build like plans on like everything has to be perfect or we're not taking action. A lot of it, I'm definitely guilty of it. Like we have to take action as soon as possible, and we don't have time to sit there and work out every possible scenario and come up with a solution for it. So we got a phrase like 80% plans, like the plan's 80% viable, and we'll figure out the 20% on the fly as we go. And I think for real estate investing, you can definitely use that analogy as well. Like there's a lot of people that get analysis paralysis, and year after year, I'm talking about getting into real estate. I'm talking about getting into real estate, and then just never do anything and never take action, because every single deal they come across, they find something wrong with it where they just had to walk. Well, that perfect investment doesn't exist. The perfect property doesn't exist. You're just going to have to like get a pretty good idea of what you want, underwrite it properly, and then just jump in and learn as you go. But yeah, I just want to jump in on those 2 very, very important points David made. And then going into my questions here. So what is the biggest mistake you've made to date? Might have the answer, but who knows? You might throw a curveball.
Yeah. The most costly mistake I've made to date was just getting into a deal with the wrong person. But the hard thing with that is that you don't really know that you're getting into the deal with the wrong person until you're already in the deal. And so for those of you who don't know, I'm almost done. We've almost court dates in 2 months, but in a big lawsuit for a big building that just did not work out. The seller didn't uphold the contract, a lot of other stuff. Biggest learning point from that is just always document everything and always bring in your team, even if there already seems to be a good team on the ground. So they seemed like they had a really good property manager, and I brought my team in a little bit late, but that wouldn't have necessarily saved the deal. So I think probably the biggest one that I could give at this point would be just when you're picking your team, treat it like you would in the military. Do the trust but verify. So when you first starting out with someone, it takes time to build those relationships. So I've had contractors kind of screw me over, and I realized like, well, I should have done the pay in such a way that they were incentivized to make sure they weren't getting all their money until they were actually done. I should have had my property manager checking on stuff. So I would just say, like, once you find a key part of your team that you trust, for me, it's my property management, my realtor, then use those people to help you keep tabs on the others. So I use my property manager to vet contractors and say, hey, you're not giving them this check until you've inspected that this, and this is done. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been probably one of the bigger mistakes I made, that because the problem with that is that it cost me money that I didn't even realize it cost me, because I found it when a contractor made a big mistake, but I was probably getting, ripped off at some point on some of my other smaller renovations before and just had no idea, because I was just trusting that they, in the military, if you say you're going to do something, you do. And in a perfect world, if somebody says, hey, yeah, I'll do this for that amount of money, then they do that for that amount of money. It's not always the reality. So just make sure you've got systems in place to just double check that you're getting what you paid for.
Yeah. There's a bunch of books out there for that too. And Jay Sky's got a bunch on dealing with contractors. A good one that I just recently read was Multifamily Millions by Dave Lindahl. He has a whole paragraph on dealing with contractors and how to incentivize them and how to write like bulletproof contracts with contractors. It goes further than just the draws. Like, you don't just do like draws in thirds. You pay third up front, third at, milestone, X, and then third at completion of the punch list. He goes further into that of like, this is how you incentivize them. Each day they finish early, you give them a 1% bonus. However, each day they complete late, then they get a 1% penalty on that last draw. So he puts things in there like that, overage penalties and stuff like that. So definitely an awesome book and resource to just how to deal with contractors better protect yourself and your interest in your property. So if you haven't read that one, check that out.
Yeah.
What do we got? Could you explain what you mean by your income isn't the problem?
Yes.
These are on your 10X kick or?
Huh? Yeah. So that's
Grant Cardone.
Well, it's people have the wrong mentality about what they need to fix, right? Mm-hmm. So if you go out and you earn an extra $1,000 a month, after taxes, you're bringing in what, $600-700 a month. But if you stop spending $1,000 a month that you didn't need to spend, it was already post-tax dollars. So you actually get to keep $1,000 a month. So I just tell people all the time, like, hey, focus on your expenses first. I look at it like this: if you have a rental property that rents for $1,000 a month, and you raise the rent to $1,100 a month, that's awesome. You got an extra $100 a month in your pocket. But if that tenant leaves, you're getting zero until you fill it again. Whereas if you had $500 in expenses and you find a way to cut it to $400 in expenses, you're still saving $100 a month. But if that tenant leaves, you're still saving the $100 a month. So, I always like to look at people forget about expenses. There are very easy ways to tweak expenses when you get into a property, whether it's high efficiency furnaces and toilets when you replace stuff, or high efficiency LED, or just recocking windows, or in my case, probably the best one I've ever had is the 10 unit had 10 individual trash cans for like $300 a month. And when I took over, I made a few phone calls, and within a half hour, I had gotten a dumpster ordered for $180 a month. And so that's $120 a month that I've now saved for two and a half years. And it was like an hour worth of work. And so people forget about expenses because they're not sexy. They focus on side hustles. They focus on boosting their income, and boosting your income is incredibly important. But getting your own spending under check, I think, is more important, because if you get an extra $1,000 a month and your spending is not in check, you're going to go blow it on something stupid. But if you can figure out your budget, live within your means, and then as you grow the income, which you should be doing, you keep your expenses at the like bare bones, you're going to scale that much faster. So I just like to say that, because everybody thinks the income's where they need to focus their energy, because that's the sexy piece. It sounds good to say I raise the rent from this to this, but there have been plenty of cases where I've gone in and made more money by not raising the rent than I would have made by raising the rent. And I still raise the rent, but just making more of a difference.
Yeah, that's my actual number one strategy in multifamily is finding multifamily properties that are just run inefficiently. So I go in and figure out where their expenses are bloated and where I can, cut expenses, like you said, put more efficient systems in, and I increase the NOI by decreasing expenses first. So my entire, phase 1, phase 2 of acquisition is just just taking over the budgets and just making the property run lean and mean and just blowing up the NOI. We did it great in our 52 unit. We're going into the 48 unit that we just bought. Same thing. And you talk about like a lot of this stuff is easy. I know for us, the easiest one I did was I installed water aerators on the faucets for the kitchen, the bath, and then a shower water saving shower head. So just from installing, I think it was $500 on 52 units, we dropped the water bill like 30%
Wow.
like by the next month, just by putting in flow restrictors that limit the amount of water. And then on top of that, we're implementing, so that's on the saving side, and then we're implementing a RUBS on the income side. So we're saving 30% expense, and then we're doing a bill back for the water around $10, $15 a month per unit. So that spread, that margin is pretty significant between the savings on the aerators and then the income. So absolutely focus on your expenses. And I keep saying this, there's probably 100 videos of me on talking about this, is that when you're talking about multifamily real estate, $1 of expense saved is worth way more than $1 increased in income. They're not the same color of money. They're two different colors. And you should be focusing on expenses first until you can start managing right, get everything lean, and then focus on increasing income, because that's what's going to blow your NOI up a lot faster. So absolutely there.
Remind me when we're done with this to talk to you. I've got a buddy who's got a really interesting strategy. I don't know if it'd work for you, but he essentially he's a solar guy by trade and has made bukus in solar, selling to like colleges and stuff. But he's starting to branch into multifamily, and his plan or play is to find larger apartments that are still not individually metered and utilize solar with like their city lending stuff and this, that, and the other, and be able to just like absolutely plummet the expenses on properties through solar setups. And it's actually been pretty cool to see some of the numbers he can do to just turn a property around with that. So I don't know, it depends on the market and stuff, but I mean, I almost did it on my 10 unit, and it would have worked out if there were some lending differences on it that weren't going to work out. But the actual like money I would have saved on it, I'll probably do it in about a year, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. I definitely have to check that out. I'm all about saving expenses. All right here. So switching gears here, because I think these are more tailored toward you. So what do you think of like the value of like creating a thought leadership platform? So I know when you started your platform, I don't know what the end goal was, but that's how I met you, 3 years ago or whatever, was at your local meetup. And then now it's scaled up to what it is now. So I just want your take on it, what the benefits of creating a thought leadership platform is, and any tips out there for anybody listening.
The benefit is huge. I got asked yesterday how I would quantify having a podcast. And I basically told him that I probably should find a way to do that, but I've never cared to, because at the end of the day, it's not very expensive to run a podcast. I mean, there are expenses, but not enough to outweigh the benefits. I mean, for me, the biggest benefits with the podcast have been that I've gotten to interview people on my show who I would never have gotten to sit down with for an hour. I mean, guys who charge thousands of dollars for mentorship will sit down with you to tell their story, and then you get to ask them the questions you want to ask them. You gain a lot just through that, but then you gain the credibility you have in the podcast. I will say that for the last 2 years, it's broken even, but it's now starting to turn around. But the benefits for the thought leadership platform and the networking, man, it's crazy. Stuff just comes out of nowhere. I mean, I've been partnered on deals where I got, essentially, it was just people I had talked to on podcasts reaching out and saying, "Hey, you want to be a partner on this?" Like, yes, actually, I do. That's a pretty solid deal. Let's do it. And some of those opportunities would have, I mean, we talked about it before we recorded. I'm a general partner on 146 unit in Columbia, South Carolina. And the way that I got into that is 2 of the people on the team had been guests on my podcast and wanted to be partnered because they wanted to try to find a way to, add value and create a relationship. And we were able to form a syndication and buy an apartment complex together. I never would have gotten into that with those guys because I never would have met them had I not been doing something that got their attention. Now, I mean, not to say you can't network with people without building a platform, but if you build a platform, people will find you, and that makes your job way easier than having to constantly go out and try to get a hold of people. So I think the benefit for a thought leadership platform are just, I mean, it's just huge. As far as tips, I mean, just be genuine. I'm the guy who goes online and talks about his failures, and people seem to appreciate that because all the rest of the gurus don't. And I think that there's just being open and honest about everything I'm doing. You mentioned that I had started this as a thought leadership platform, I think was the way it was asked, or something. The reality is I just decided one day that I was going to document what I was doing because I thought about starting a blog and couldn't figure out anything else to talk about. So I was like, well, I'll just write about what I'm doing, and if nothing else, I can show it to my kids. And then it just kind of grew out of nowhere. And it's been really cool, but it's like the thought originally was just to write down what I was doing and talk about it. There's something powerful about that. I think if you've got a good story, I don't know, the benefits are huge. I don't know. If you're thinking about it, definitely go for it. It's not hard. I mean, I got fancy stuff now, but pick up a cell phone and talk into it. It's easy.
Yeah. That's what, I was reading Joe Fairless's book, and that's what, he said he did like his first 100 episodes or something with just a cell phone. Now he's, the longest running podcast, ever, I think. I don't know, or at least the longest running real estate one.
Yeah. Longest running daily or something like that. Yeah. He's
at 3,000 episodes. It's stupid. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how that man does it. I just recorded with him a week or 2 ago, and that guy's busy.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, that's awesome. You're going to be on that. Is he on yours or you're on his?
No, yeah, I'm on his.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, yeah, I don't know if I got anything else.
Tell us about the last deal that you were involved in as a GP.
What would you like to know?
Well, how did you structure? How did you?
Yeah, I mean, really, I just kind of got brought into the fold to help with these guys. So I helped with underwriting, I helped with due diligence, and then it was more or less I'd kind of been talking about learning about syndications, and they were like, "Hey, we'll let you bring you in as a general partner. You can see the inside and work with us." It's a pretty solid deal. 7% preferred return, projected 18% IRR, 7-year hold with a refinance at 3 and a sale at 7. We're doing like a 2-fold on, so we're turning all the tenant base over, and then we're going to, when we do exterior renovations, and then we're going to renovate units after we stabilize once, because it's a pretty big gap between current rents and market rents. Although we might leave the current tenant base in for a little while because it's like 40% Section 8.
Nice.
So right now, that's about the best tenant. Yeah. So I think the plan may have shifted a little bit as far as when we're going to start turning over tenant class and focusing more on beautifying, external and expenses and stuff like that. But yeah, it was cool. I'll tell you that the syndication model, I like it. It's scalable. It's fun. I think after being involved, I don't know that I would ever want to be like, for me, I don't know if being the main guy is ever going to fit into my plan. Like, I liked being a part of it, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that just seems like it's way above my head, that I was like, yeah, maybe I'll stick with some of my buy and hold stuff solo and I'll just be a partner on this stuff. I don't know that you'll ever see David being the syndication guy. But I enjoy them as a
LP.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my goal in life is to be an operator long enough to build up a huge nest egg and then just go be a career LP.
You can make some great returns being a limited partner for sure.
Yep.
And no stress. Well,
exactly.
Minimal stress. As long as you're invested with people you like. Yeah. I mean, and even if the property broke even, right, you get your money back in 5 years. That's not the worst thing that could happen with an investment.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my end goal, is to just operate, as long as I can to reach my goal, and then just LP life.
Oh yeah, and then we'll go travel places.
Exactly.
Drink in the beach, toes in the sand, or whatever that song is.
Yep, exactly.
For our audience, can you break down like what's the difference between LP and GP and the general syndication model?
Yeah, I'm over here screaming acronyms at people. So general partner and limited partner, the super basic breakdown is that the general partners actually manage the deal and the limited partners are more just the private, like the investors. So as a limited partner, aside from, you should still vet the deal, you should still vet the operators, and you should still understand the entire ins and outs of the deal because you're making an investment. But theoretically, if you knew the people, you could say, yeah, here, wired my money, take it, high five, and that would be it. You wouldn't actually have to do anything with the property except sit back and collect a check. The general partners are the ones who actually do the contracting, due diligence, renovations, the underwriting, appraisals, and financing, and headaches, and they do all the work. And so there's usually, it depends on the partnership, but there's a split 70-30 or whatever, where general partners get this part of the return, limited partners get this part. It gets very nuanced in there depending on who you're talking to, but it really just boils down to whether you want to be, have your fingers on things and dealing with stuff, or whether you want to just have an investment that is essentially like a real estate investor trust or investment trust, except that it's in a specific deal with a specific operator with much lower fees, and you get depreciation and all that other stuff. So it's as passive as investing in a REIT, but yet way more control, and you actually know who's operating the deal. And I much prefer syndication with people that I know over the idea of throwing my money into a real estate investment trust and not really having any say in where it goes. Mm-hmm. So that's like super, like 5,000 foot view of syndication, I guess.
That was good.
That's perfect.
All right. You want to do the last four, Duke?
Yeah. So as we're wrapping this up, what's the best book that you would recommend?
Somebody getting started in real estate. If you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad yet, you definitely should.
You can't do that one.
Well, no. I just throw that in there, like, I think as a beginner book, honestly, Brandon Turner and Josh Dorkin wrote How to Invest in Real Estate, and that is probably like the best soup to nuts, just basic overview of like what you need to understand to kind of figure out which direction you want to go. I think that's a good starting point. I think from there's a ton of great books out there, but as I mentioned before, your first goal is figuring out what your goal is and what strategy aligns with that, and then dig into all the different niches. It doesn't do you any good to read 6 books on flipping houses if you want to be a passive real estate investor.
Exactly. That goes back to the goals, right? Figure out what your goals are, and then work backwards. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, any ask or request for our audience?
I don't know. I have no idea how to answer that one. You might have just stumped me. Nothing comes to mind.
Any places that you want them to visit, or?
In that regard. Yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, my website is from militarytomillionaire.com, where you can just find me Military Millionaire or Military to Millionaire. I'm getting well enough known on Google that it'll show you the right spot if you type in any of that generally.
Perfect.
Right on.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today for this podcast episode. And yeah, have a great day.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys. It's been fun.
I see, David.
All right.
Well, Duke, that was an awesome show. David definitely gave us a lot of value. Again, if you didn't hear, you can find him at from militarytomillionaire.com. He's also on all the social media sites. If you liked our podcast here, you can find us at tricityequity.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. We also run a Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and More. So you can reach out, connect with our group there, get a lot of value, a lot of education, a lot of networking done there. So until next time, Duke, see you.
All right.